Right now, there's a debate raging between the old and the young in a way that has never been done before in this country, and it affects every single person. Welcome back to the Nathan Burton Academy and this week's Explainer video. Today we're going to go slightly off topic and talk a little bit about the background around the state pension and give you some context about the debate that's running really hot in the news with respect to whether we can continue to afford the triple lock that allows the state pension to essentially beat inflation every year. But first, by way of a bit of background, the concept of a state pension is something that's relatively new comparative to society as a whole, and it's only really something that we started to see with the introduction of the Old Age Pension Act in the early 20th century. Now, back then, people generally didn't live as long, they generally weren't in as good a health, and what you actually found was that although we introduced the concept of the state pension and we made those payments to people to lift them out of the real extremes of poverty that some of them were experiencing at the time, only a tiny percentage of people actually qualified for it. And that remained the case for a number of years, mainly because, put quite simply, the vast majority of people didn't live to be old enough to hit the then age benchmark. However, from around the 1940s, we started to see the state pension change into something that we perhaps recognise and are more familiar with today. And that is, through the traditional state pension, or what is now known as the new state pension, is essentially the pension system that evolved out of those reforms. So what you have now is a system whereby, if we go back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, for those people that are kind of currently at or thereabouts at state pension age, a social contract was essentially made with those people by the government of the day, or the governments of the day, that said, hey, pay into the system, give us a percentage of your earnings to fund tax as part of the tax bill, and we will use that to fund the state pension for today's pensioners. And in return, we will afford you the same favour when you get to state pension age. And those ages have moved slightly. I won't go into that too much right now because that's not really what this is about. This is about the concept of the pension. Ultimately, what that meant was you had society's biggest version of a paid forward favour, with the workforce of today and the workforce of yesteryears looking after and providing the funding for the pensions of the pensioners or retirees of that period of time. Importantly, there is not, and never has there been, an individual pension pot. So unlike a private pension, where you pay into that system, or you pay into that pension to your pension provider or your SIP, and you build a pot of money that is individual to you, that does not work in the same way for the state pension. It's all about how much you pay in over the course of your working life, and at the end, you'll be rewarded with a state pension if you've paid enough in. Paid for by the people who are in the workplace at that time paying national insurance contributions. Great, works in theory, right? However, the working age population is slowly shrinking comparative to the state pensioners or the older people in the country. Over the last 25 years or so, the average age of the population has moved up significantly. Medical advancements mean people are living longer, and societal behaviours over the last 60, 70 years mean that we are now getting a much larger percentage of people who are older or who are going to be older in the near future, and a much smaller percentage of people younger in the workforce making those contributions. Equally, if you're my age, in your 30s, maybe you're a little bit older, maybe you're a little bit younger, people aren't having kids at the same rate that they once did. And ultimately what that means is, over the next 20 years or so, if that rate continues, the average age and the number of people in the population is going to decrease. But what about the pension? Because we still have all these people who have paid into the system, who have supported the pensioners of that previous generation, and are now, quite rightly some might say, looking for their payment to support them in their old age. But what you now have going on in the news is essentially that contract that society set up with those people 20, 30, 40 years ago or more being negotiated on television in the media, in front of them, with no ability to influence those negotiations, and as well, because they are either already pensioners or they will be in the very near future, a very limited ability to do anything about it. Now, they would quite rightly feel aggrieved, but I wonder what that younger person's argument is as well. And I think it perhaps goes something like this. In the next 10 years or so, the state pension in its current format will be unsustainable in terms of funding. That's not about morals. That's not about principles, about whether we should look after our older people or not. That's about mathematics. That's about the fact that the number of older people is increasing, and those older people are living longer and requiring more healthcare and more support. And there are less and less younger people paying into the system to fund it. And also those people that are paying into that system are getting less and less confidence that that same safety net that they are currently funding will be there for them. Of course, the context for them is that, this is a really difficult job market. This is a really difficult economy. We've had a housing market that has cooked and cooked over the last 15, 20 years or so, mostly fueled by cheap credit. And we'll come on to that in a different video in a few weeks' time. But these people that are struggling to get a job, that are struggling to get their pay to beat inflation, that maybe not can buy a house, and are generally struggling to get and stay ahead. But they're being asked to fund a pension that they'll likely never get themselves at a rate that beats inflation every single year. There's no easy answer, and maybe we need to have a long and hard conversation as a country and as a society about the kind of communities and the kind of society that we want to live in, and perhaps shape our tax policy to move away from where can we maximise the most revenue through to how do we encourage certain behaviours to shape the kind of society that we want to live in, and use the tax system as a mechanism of doing that. Really great to hear your thoughts. Hope that helps you understand more about what's going on with respect to the state pension as a general concept, and we'll look forward to giving you a bit more of an explainer about how the pension works in terms of what you can get, how you build up a state pension, whether you can buy back more credits to boost your pension, and so on, if that's something that's going to impact you in the next few years. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe so that we can get the message out there to as many people as possible, and ultimately give them the ability to get access to the knowledge and information that they need to make better financial decisions.